Hey, we want to warn you, you're about to watch some graphic videos of police dogs biting people. So if that's something you're not okay with seeing right now, this is your heads up. Okay, here's the episode.
Okay. No!
Sir, please make him stop, please.
He's doing what he can.
We're trying to get you off.
Get you, ma'am.
Take a moment, it's okay.
The dog was eating me.
You want that?
The dog was eating me. It was licking my leg and swallowing pieces of my leg. It was eating me.
He came over and attacked me without being given that command, and when he was told to release, he did not release.
I felt like I was a dog too. I felt like I was treated like an animal also.
This is a story about police weapons with minds of their own.
Out!
We uncovered cases across the country of police canines disobeying their handlers with gruesome consequences. They're trained to bite people and let go on command, but we found these dogs don't always follow orders.
I am trying.
Public trusts us with these animals because we sell this product that says these are highly trained dogs that will do anything we tell them. But if they don't listen to us, well, then that's actually not true.
No one knows how often it's happening because no one is tracking it. And we find out the dogs that disobey often wind up right back out in our communities. Let's see what's brewing. I'm Jenna Bourne, and I'm an investigative reporter at 10 Tampa Bay. If you're new here, welcome to our caffeine-fueled deep dive. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode.
Okay.
This is the bite that sparked our whole investigation. This canine bite happened right here in the county where I work, Pinellas County, over at the Waffle House parking lot in Largo, to be precise. On March 3rd, 2021, Alan Martin was complying with Pinellas County Sheriff's Office deputies.
Get on the ground, face down. Okay.
Canine Bingo bit him, disobeying his handler's commands to stop.
Why bite me?
Canine handler Deputy Claudio DeMundo struggled to get Bingo to release the bite, ultimately forcing what's called a break stick into the dog's mouth and yanking off Martin's sneaker. Martin wasn't even the guy they were there to arrest. Deputies were after this guy, the passenger in Martin's truck, after what they say was an undercover drug buy. Martin's lawyer told us his client didn't want to talk at this point because he's taking legal action. How do you feel when you watch those videos?
Well, it's terrible. It's a bad situation that shouldn't have happened. It was avoidable if Deputy DeMundo had the dog on a lead like he should have been, and that's really what it comes down to.
DeMundo was ultimately disciplined with a written reprimand, which is how I found out this even happened, by looking through the agency's disciplinary records. Canine Bingo stayed on the force. Should people feel safe with Canine Bingo back out on the streets?
Absolutely, because Deputy DeMundo got his act together. Don't make it more than what it is.
Well, it seems to me that the problem wasn't just that the lead wasn't on the dog also wouldn't release the bite.
And again, the dog is not a robot. The dog is not mechanical. The dog is a living being. The dogs don't always listen. They listen the majority of the time, and we wouldn't put them out there.
What would you say to somebody who hears that and thinks, well, if you know the dogs sometimes don't let go, is it worth that risk?
Yeah, don't run from the police. If you're not running, remember
This guy wasn't running.
But this is an anomaly. This is a one-off. You're making this be like the situation. When's the last time that this happened? This doesn't happen that often.
It happens more often than you might think. We looked into 16 bites around the country from 2015 to 2021 that involved canines disobeying their handlers. After reviewing the circumstances of dozens of bites, we felt those were the clearest examples of disobedience. We're talking about disobeying commands not to bite someone, refusing to let go of a bite, or both. And these were just the cases we found out about. This is not meant to be an exhaustive count. Unfortunately, that's impossible because no one is collecting data on how often canines are disobeying their handlers during bites. So we've been finding these examples through court records and news reports, then putting in public records requests with law enforcement agencies for more info. We got the vast majority of the body cam videos we're showing you from the people who were bitten and their lawyers. Several agencies, like the Huntsville and Talladega police departments in Alabama, haven't provided us a single public record or answered any of our questions.
Can you please get this dog off me?
You are going to have to wait just a second, lady.
On June 12, 2015, Ashley White was suspected of jumping out of the passenger seat of a speeding car and running. Talladega Police Canine Anders' handler pulled on his choke collar and gave him commands to let go in Dutch.
Andor, look!
But Ander wouldn't let go.
Sir, please.
I am trying. I'm trying.
Oh, please, oh, please. Oh, Lord Jesus.
Los.
Lord Jesus.
Andor, los.
Talladega police won't confirm if Canine Ander stayed on the force. In Huntsville, Alabama, Canine Ronan bit this officer over his vest
Oh, I gotta choke him off.
for 40 seconds,
Come out to me now.
then bit a second officer
Out.
in the groin
Out.
for 30 seconds.
I'm sorry, man. Did you teach him to bite on the... No.
Then he bit the intended target, George Matthews, who was suspected of stealing an SUV.
Good boy. Out.
It took about 20 seconds of verbal commands and pulling on Canine Ronan's collar to release that bite. Huntsville police won't confirm if Canine Ronan stayed on the force, but in a deposition 2 years later, his handler said they were still working together.
Oh, there's a lady.
In St. Paul, Minnesota,
Out, out.
Canine Gabe bit an innocent woman taking out her trash.
We're trying to get you off.
It took 30 seconds to get him to release. St. Paul police tell us the agency retired Canine Gabe, transferred his handler out of the canine unit, and reformed its canine policies.
What did I do to him?
Nothing.
In Roswell, Georgia, 18-year-old Wild DeCellian was suspected of being in a car that was reported stolen. He sat on a curb and put his hands up, then down. Roswell Police Canine Robbie's handler wrote in his report his dog interpreted those movements as unacceptable and furtive. Canine Robbie disobeyed those verbal commands and bit DeCellian anyway for 40 seconds as his handler shouted commands to release. Tried to choke the dog and raised the power on his shock collar. Canine Robbie released, then bit DeCellian again for another 8 seconds. In all, Canine Robbie ignored more than a dozen commands before trying to bite his handler. The dog stayed on the force until he retired 4 years later.
And I thought about my family, I thought about my kids.
Nicole Edwards, who's a mom of 3, walked away while Lake Charles police were searching a car she was a passenger in. They used Canine Bobby to find her.
Los. Oh.
Canine Bobby's handler gave 9 verbal commands in Dutch to let go, pulled up his dog's choke chain, and hit him twice on the head. It took 50 seconds to release the bite.
Sir, please make him stop, please.
He's doing what he can.
Oh, something ripping.
The dog, my meat was in his mouth, and I was like, is that my meat? And I was asking him, is that my meat? And I was like, get it and put it back. You know, I've seen in movies where they'll do the finger or, freeze. I was serious, and then, he's like, yeah, you should have stayed still. You should have stayed still.
Here's what Canine Bobby's handler told Edwards' lawyer during a deposition.
Why is he not going to release and sit as you as handler gives him that command?
That scene is? Do you know any dog that's going to sit there, release and sit in a chaotic situation?
Canine Bobby stayed on the force for another year before retirement, according to that same deposition. Out of the 14 canines involved in the 16 bites we looked into, at least 6 stayed on the force. 3 were retired shortly after the bite. For 5 of the dogs, their law enforcement agencies have ignored our questions about whether they stayed on the force. Okay, so we've shown you this is happening all over the country, and at this point you're probably wondering, why is this happening? And I wish we had a simple answer for you, but we found there are a lot of factors. First of all, like Sheriff Gualtieri was saying at the beginning of this story, these dogs have minds of their own, even if they're well trained.
Everybody knows that animals are imperfect. Everybody knows that the canines are imperfect, and you can't totally 100% all the time control a living being.
Why do canines sometimes disobey their handlers?
Well, poor training is the simplest. Sometimes it's a bad match between the handler and the dog.
Born in Sarasota, Dr. Charlie Meslow worked as a canine handler for 9 years here in Florida before he was hurt in the line of duty. He went on to become a leading researcher on canine training. Here in Florida, new canine teams have to do 480 hours of training together to get certified. To pass the apprehension part of certification, the state standard includes using no more than 4 commands. The canine shall release the bite as commanded by the handler. But some states don't have certification standards.
I'm in Michigan. We have no regulations at all for our police dogs. None.
Are there any national standards when it comes to regulating police canine use?
No, there are not. There's national canine associations, and each of them, for their qualifications, have a standard.
For one of those organizations, the National Police Canine Association, their standards include that the handler has 45 seconds for the canine to release the bite, using up to 4 commands. And the conditions dogs face during certification are different from what they experience out in the field, with flashing police lights, people shouting, and plenty of distractions.
But that's also how when officers qualify with a firearm. It has nothing to do with what we actually do on the street. Certification has virtually nothing to do with a real-life deployment. And unfortunately, that's how most certifications are. It's just a metric that's easy to measure.
We showed some of the body cam videos you just saw to the executive director of the U.S. Police Canine Association, which Don Slavic says is the biggest and oldest national certifying association for police canines.
The optics were definitely not good for law enforcement on those.
He says he's currently working with canine leaders across the country to identify best practices for canine units.
There are 3 areas to start looking when something is happening that's negatively affecting the canine program, and that would be the policy, the canine policy itself, the use of force policy, and then the next would be a supervisory issue, and then the next would be training. So there's more than just the dog is disobeying, as you say. Think about the tens of thousands of deployments done every year across the United States where we don't have this problem.
But Jason Anglero-Wyrick says it's past time to retire canine units. He was tasered. Then the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office released Canine Vader on him. His teen daughter captured the clearest angle on her cell phone.
Face down! Okay. Put your face on the ground! The dog ate my leg! Please, it's eating my...
Swat that. Swat that!
One deputy wrote in his report he heard the canine handler give 6 commands to release. The handler reported he also tried pulling Canine Vader's collar, and that the electronic collar may have been malfunctioning. Canine Vader is still on the force. Deputies were at the home because a 911 caller reported Anglero-Wyrick threatened his family with a gun. 12 minutes after the bite, the 911 caller said he wasn't sure if it was Anglero-Wyrick after all.
Cannot identify who the suspects were or are.
I was hunted for sport. I wasn't hunted to prevent crime. I wasn't hunted to stop me or prevent me. I was hunted for sport because I looked a certain way. And they've been doing this for histories.
A deputy said this to his daughter, who recorded the bite.
We can let you record it. Just do us a favor and don't try to incite a riot.
You guys are, this is disrespectful.
This was April 2020, the month before George Floyd's murder, which sparked Black Lives Matter protests across the world.
Come on!
At least 11 of the 16 people bitten in the cases we looked into were Black.
It's not like I was committing a crime or, doing anything. I was literally just walking my dog.
Tacoma Park police were in Ayanna Brooks' neighborhood looking for people suspected of stealing a vehicle. A police report says, despite commands no, down, here, Canine Drogo ran toward Brooks and her boyfriend.
The handler was trying to get the dog to release, and the dog never heeded any commands.
Tacoma Park police tell us Canine Drogo was taken off the force because his handler retired during the investigation into the bite. Brooks says it's time to start tracking how often police canines are disobeying their handlers during bites.
I'm sure if we were able to get all of that data and look at it, we would see a clear pattern and a clear need for something to change. And, that could be part of why it's not being done.
I was on the ground spreading, and that dog came and attacked me.
Man, I'm so sorry, dude.
And you didn't do nothing wrong.
Because when there's no data or there's no hardcore analysis of what's going on, it's easy to just kind of, like I said, kind of chalk it up to, oh, this is just a one-off thing. But when you look at the bigger picture of all of these police departments, then you can see a clear pattern with the dogs themselves.
That's a good boy.
Good boy! Stay.
Thanks for watching What's Brewing. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and I'll see you next time.